Welcome to the Open Talent Report, the award-winning podcast where we dive deep into the emerging trends in global employment, the future of work, the talent crisis, the demographic deficit, and the new world of work with our expert host, Connor Heaney. Connor is the managing director at CXE EMEA, a company that takes the hassle out of finding, compliantly engaging and paying contractors anywhere in the world. In this podcast, Connor brings you captivating conversations with top CEOs, visionary founders, and industry experts. Together, they shed light on all things open talent and the evolving nature of work itself. So grab your headphones and join us on this exhilarating journey.
Hello and welcome to this week's show where I'm delighted to be joined by friend of the show and friend of mine, and I think it's fair to say one of the good guys, one of the really good guys in our sector. And Saleem, it's great to have you back. I think it's been a couple of years since we've had you on the show, and I think a warm welcome to you. Really looking forward to catching up, hearing about WorkLama, hearing about you guys, hearing about where the sector's going, what's going to happen with direct sourcing. Can we actually turn it into a SaaS subscription model? Can we enlighten people on this journey that you're on? But I'm really, really keen to hear about what you've been up to, Saleem, about the evolution of direct sourcing and of course, the technology that underpins this, which WorkLama is a big part of. So how are you doing, my friend? Are you keeping well?
Doing well, Connor. Thanks for having me one more time to chat with you. Always enjoy our conversations and looking forward to what we have in store today.
Stuff. Well, Saleem, just for the benefit of our audience, would you just mind giving a bit of a recap on yourself, what your role is? I know you're a co-founder and the COO at WorkLama, but would you just explain your background, Saleem, how you got into this sector and space? I don't want to call it an industry because we're not producing anything, although companies like yours are producing and making great technology and great technology platforms, of course. But love to hear your story in short, Saleem, and then really want to hear about what WorkLama has been up to, because I've had the pleasure of spending many conferences with you, Saleem, and your team in Sudhakar, your other co-founder and CEO, and I think it's fair to say that your messaging and marketing is loud and proud, but in the best possible way. So can't wait to hear what you guys have been up to, and then we're going to talk about the future. So over to you, Saleem. Thank you.
Yeah. We started WorkLama in 2016, and when we did that, all of us who got into this space, we weren't originally from the space, but we spent 8 years now, and feels like that's 25 years or so. But yeah, so coming into this space in 2016, we saw a need for finding talent using a technology platform. Back then, I think it was all Uber for workforce, right? The Uber was being applied to anything that had to do with a multi-sided platform. And we took the plunge and we went into the light industrial space, mainly because Sudhakar, my co-founder, and we had many years of experience in implementing warehouse management software. So we had a lot of relationships with operations folks who are running warehouses for any of the big retail brands in the US, right? Sometimes I say, close your eyes, list all the retail brands, slide your finger down wherever it stops. If you open your eyes, most likely you have worked with that one. We had those relationships and we did a lot of vetting. Well, Sudhakar did a lot of vetting, trying to find out if there was an opportunity for a platform, and the answer was a resounding yes. And that's when we took a platform that was built under a company called Newiz and applied it to help companies source talent on demand. And coming out of that, we quickly realized that we are not equipped to be a staffing company. We just thought how hard it can be, put a tech platform, find jobs, and have talent sign up, and they all figure it out themselves, right? But no, that's not what happened. I still have scars from trying to get workers' comp insurance. And, we decided not to pursue that path. We took a step back and looked at what is needed in the market. And we were really surprised to see that there wasn't a single solution out there that was purely focused on talent, right? Put talent at the center, do everything that has to do with talent. And that's when we said, okay, that's what we're going to build. And we built WorkLama, a platform it is today. We laid out a roadmap to do everything that has to do with talent. And we applied the principles of e-commerce to talent, right? Take the principles of how a brand treats their customers, and we just turned it around towards talent, and that's helped us be where we are today. And that, I think it'd be fair to say we are a leader in the market when it comes to direct sourcing. And the way I would describe our platform is we are a unified AI-driven platform that has everything to do with talent. And what that means is, talent marketing, which has everything to do with SEO optimized career portals, marketing campaigns, referral programs, right? It's a talent marketing component. Then we have talent relationship management, right? How do you nurture talent? How do you curate talent? How do you redeploy them? All of those components fit into it. And then we have an ATS, onboarding piece, and then a piece that has to do with high volume shift management. Sorry, it took a long time, but you asked me many questions in one, so to touch on.
I did. My mind, I've got an overactive mind, Saleem. It goes too fast sometimes for me. I've got all these, I normally have to write stuff down before I ask them, otherwise I get into trouble. But Saleem, so it sounds like the platform has evidently evolved. I think back to in my day job, I think you and I have been working together in our companies for about the last coming up to 5 years, I think. Now at this point, maybe 5 years, I think it's 5. And it's been great to see that evolution. And I think not only has your platform and technology evolved, but I get the feeling, both anecdotally and from quantitative data, that the market now is responding to technology platforms such as WorkLama. And I know direct sourcing has been through various iterations from our friends at Staffing Industry Analysts. I think we were on direct sourcing 3.0 when I last looked at, and perhaps we're on direct sourcing 4.0 at the moment. But I know you and I have discussed this on the various webinars that you and I and others have hosted and done over the years, Saleem. But does direct sourcing need a new naming convention? Does it really do what it says on the tin? Or should we just call it something that's much more recognizable and familiar to the buyers in our sector?
Yeah. So in staying true to your style of asking questions, there were 3 or 4 there, so I'm going to get kicked all the time. So I think we should get rid of the versioning, right? I think the versioning has more to do with, I would say, evolution in the technology platforms, and then the focus being more around talent as opposed to purely a transactional find a job and fill the position, right? So I think the versioning definitely is not needed. But from, one of the things that we see is there's a lot of confusion in the market. And most of the times I feel like it's created by people or companies that can do 1 or 2 pieces of what direct sourcing is, right? If I can do 1 or 2 things, then I'm going to tell you what I do is direct sourcing, right? And try to convince you that's what it is. And you as the buyer, when you talk to someone else, the next person in line that you're trying to do due diligence with, they'll give you a different perspective based on what they can do, right? And I think that's what's created a lot of confusion. And I think the confusion exists more around how to operationalize it, right? It's not with the tech. It's more around how do you operationalize it in a mature ecosystem, right? Because you have MSPs, you have ERs that deal with pre-identified candidates, then you have staffing suppliers, and then you have VMS providers, right? So there's an ecosystem, and the reason there's so much confusion, right, it should validate that there's a demand and a definite need for it, right? If everyone is jumping and screaming and putting their own name on it, it means they do see that it is going to happen. It's just a matter of time, right? So the way we look at direct sourcing, so we've answered the whole versioning thing, right? It's more of a tech thing. And the confusion is because everyone defines it based on what they can do. So far, we've been very successful, and we've been talking about what are the pieces of direct sourcing for a while now. But we are in a place where now, with a level of authority, we can say what are the pieces that make it up, right? because we now have proof points. We know what good looks like. We also know what terrible looks like. So direct sourcing has 5 key components. There's talent marketing, which has to do with branding, leveraging your brand, all the pieces that we talked about, right? Then you have curation, which I want to be very clear, it's not the same as recruiting, because a recruiter will never invest their time to curate because they're so focused on, I have a job, I need to find somebody, I need to put them on assignment, right? Curation is a strategic function where you look at what your current talent community or talent pools look like, layering in business demand and market dynamics to decide then where is it that you're going to build those talent pools. And if the talent in those talent pools is pre-vetted, curated, ready to deploy, right? Tell me a recruiter who's going to invest that much time doing that, right? And then you have recruiting, right? So talent marketing, curation, recruiting, which is something we all know, right? And then you have a tech platform that is purpose-built for these purposes, right? Talent marketing, curation, and recruiting pieces. And then after the tech platform, you have your UOR and AOR, right? So if you don't have these 5 pieces in play, then you're not truly looking at a direct sourcing solution. You're doing some flavors of whatever it should be called, right? And then does this sit by itself or does this sit under an MSP? That's a decision we make based on where you are in the maturity curve, right? So what we advise people is when you start with the least disruption to your existing ecosystem, right? Yeah, your cost savings are not going to be that high, which means you probably are going to outsource all 5 functions, but you're going to leverage your brand and make sure the talent that is built is yours, right? So then as you keep moving down the curve, you start bringing different pieces in. You may bring talent marketing in, then you may start bringing curation, and then you may start bringing recruiting in, or since recruiting is such a commodity product, you may choose to outsource and keep that, right? So that's how we look at direct sourcing. Therefore, I don't think there is a need for versioning. Now, if you were to boil it down to very simple terms, I'm not sure who coined this, but I've heard our friend Mark Jones use it.
Yes.
I want to give him credit, but it is nothing but contingent RPO, right? So basically, you're leveraging your brand with a team of resources and a tech platform to directly source contingent labor. Again, pre-ID'd candidates are not direct sourcing. If you keep saying, I've been doing direct sourcing for 20 years, then you're basically doing pre-ID'd candidates. You tell somebody to give that talent to you. Yeah, you directly source them, but that is not direct sourcing.
I agree. And I love those 5 components. And I love your analysis of direct sourcing and where it can be additive to the ecosystem. But the thought occurred to me, Saleem, it's probably an unfair question, but I was thinking about this a lot as I was listening intently to your answer around perhaps the adoption or the late adoption of direct sourcing and talent pool technologies, because I've been in this space of talent pool technologies or adjacent to it for the last 10 years, actually coming up to just over 11 years now, and worked on one of the first ones. I worked in some of the early entrants into the market before you guys came in and really shook it up, and I think positively disrupted the market and have probably set a pace for some of your competitors. It's been quite interesting observing this space. But my question is this, actually, Saleem, and this is what I was thinking about as you were speaking, is platforms like yours and direct sourcing, which is a core component of talent technology platforms, right? Is it complementary and additive to the ecosystem, or is it disruptive and competitive? And I think that's where probably some of the challenges have arrived, because in a perfect world, right, if you want to disintermediate a sector, right, trying to disintermediate a sector that has all these component parts in an ecosystem is quite difficult to do. It's not like, with taxis and Ubers, right? You had taxis, they have a car, they have a driver. Uber comes in and technologizes that, really disrupts the business model entirely. With direct sourcing and technology, it strikes me that it's much more difficult to be a disruptor and a competitor to the ecosystem, and therefore direct sourcing and technologies such as yours are actually complementary and additive to the ecosystem. But I think where you were going, Saleem, if maybe you weren't going this way, but what I picked up is, should you engage with the MSP? Should it sit outside the MSP? Do you need staffing providers? If you've got a direct sourcing model, as the direct sourcing model and the technology gets faster and better and learns from the data, I mean, why do you need a bricks and mortar recruitment team or, any of the top 20, top 50 recruitment companies? So anyway, really what I want to dial it back to is what you're doing and technologies like yours, is it disruptive and competitive to the status quo, or is it complementary and additive in your view?
Yeah. So, okay. You're trying to get me in trouble, but it's okay. No, which means if you're disrupting, you had to get in trouble. So, um, the way I look at it is in this example, right? I look at disruption and competitive complementary as two different things, right? We definitely are going to disrupt the ecosystem, which means certain other functions that currently exist may not look exactly the way they have traditionally looked, right? So this solution is going to bring disruption to the ecosystem, and the incumbent players, the role they play and what they do is going to change. So I don't see staffing suppliers completely going away. There are certain functions and roles that just don't make sense to be filled through a direct sourcing channel. And it also varies by industry. So if I'm, let us say, a manufacturer of auto parts, for example, right? The need for data scientists that you may have may not be the same as somebody else, which means for you to invest the time and energy to build your own talent pool of that type of skill may not make sense, right? Which means that's an ecosystem where you would rely on staffing suppliers for those roles. Whereas, for other type of talent in your auto manufacturing industry, you may directly source them through your own direct sourcing channels, right? And I think the one function where the role may evolve is going to be for the MSPs, right? They're being very focused on managing staffing suppliers and making sure they live up to the SLAs, everything that we know what they do, right? But now there is this new avenue of sourcing talent that either can fall under their purview or can exist as a parallel component, right? So that's where if this exists it doesn't matter if it exists parallel or under them, right? So there just need to be a revised look into how they will function in the next phase of this ecosystem. And few of the companies that we have really close partnerships with, they're already ahead of the curve. They know this is going to happen. So they're taking more of a strategic role than pure supplier management role. They're getting into, hey, how do we help you plan for and be successful in a new world of talent with the whole skill-based hiring and the whole, talent being looked at as a holistic competitive asset for an organization as opposed to contingent purely being hey, if I need something, I'll go there, right? So there must be role will evolve. And one of the things that, I want to clarify here is I had someone ask a question. Everything you're describing looks like what a staffing supplier does. So then why do I need to do this myself? Okay. The question is, if you have a staffing supplier in your ecosystem, they'll do this at 10 to 15% lower cost and gives you complete control of the talent if you choose to depart ways with them. So lower cost, everything they're doing is they're doing it for you as an outsourced function where all the talent that's built is yours, and they won't market other jobs to that talent, right? Or they won't market that talent to somebody else, right? So if you have a staffing supplier that's willing to do that, then you should definitely engage them and put them in the role of being a direct sourcing provider, but do make sure that there is a clear understanding on their abilities to curate, their abilities to do talent marketing and all those pieces. So this is not the same staffing solution, right? That's what I want to make sure people clearly understand.
Yeah, I agree. And I think sometimes the way you've described that, it has been confusing from the perspective of buyers, and also certain staffing companies have been marketing themselves as well. But if I think about the current economic model or commercial model for talent marketing platforms or talent community platforms, or platforms such as WorkLama that do so many amazing things, right, for in terms of putting the talent first, but also making sure that the client or the end user or the intermediary in the ecosystem, such as an MSP or an EOR or an AOR, have a great experience. But it strikes me, Saleem, that although the tech does the work, right, there's a lot of work that goes into setting up a technology platform with all the integrations, because as most of our listeners will appreciate, the world of HR tech and human capital tech is not a straightforward one. There's point solution for this, point solution for that. There's invoice system for this, procure to pay system for this, vendor management system for this, ATS stroke CRM for this. And unfortunately, in many cases, they're not always integrated, and they don't always make sense. But that's not really my point. My point is that technology is typically bought on a software as a service basis or as a per seat basis. But if you look at how direct sourcing technology or talent marketing technology, whatever is the most appropriate descriptor, Saleem, it strikes me as somewhat crazy and potentially unfair the way that is bought, because it's typically bought the way you would buy a typical contingent staffing or recruiting model. But as you've demonstrated by explaining the 5 key components that go into that with the technology, that doesn't, in my view, make sense to have a commercial model that's based essentially on success of placing someone. And then if you under or overlay that with the curation partner that's essentially doing that upfront work to engage talent upfront, to put them into the appropriate talent pools and essentially keep them warm and nurture them and get them ready to be matched, if you like. There's a lot of upfront effort that, yes, of course, some of the technology or a lot of the technology can do, but you still need people to do it and people to pay for. And it strikes me that the economic stroke commercial model from the buying community is not really aligned with the work effort and how technology and adjacent services are typically bought. So my question is, do you agree with that? Is there a better way that we can make platforms like yours a better way to commercially engage with platforms such as yours within the direct sourcing world?
Yeah. So if you look at why we are where we are in terms of how direct sourcing is monetized by suppliers, right? It's because of a precedence that was set when VMS first came into the market, right? So the whole notion of, I think it's a very fancy term of saying vendor financed or supplier funded, right? But you're essentially paying for it, but you're paying for it as you're consuming it, so to speak, right? But I think you're paying a lot more by paying for it as you consume it, as opposed to paying upfront, right? What I mean by that is, once I find someone to work for you who is the end customer, let's say, you're my end customer, Connor. I found a housekeeper for you, right? And I just need to get a finder's fee. And after that, what is it that I'm doing for you? I'm doing nothing, right? The person is working for you. Why should I keep getting paid $1 an hour for every hour that person works for you? Unless I'm doing payroll processing, which is an ongoing perpetual service I'm providing, right? That makes sense, right? So if you now look at how the perm hire happens, there it's a fee per hire and you're done, right? You're not paying perpetually or as long as the person is working for a company. But yeah, I mean, there are terms where, the person needs to be there for 90 days or whatever. So those all can be there, but paying for someone perpetually for every hour that they work, once I find that person for you, it doesn't make sense for especially someone that's from outside looking at it, right?
Exactly.
So now, if you look at the reason that probably happened that way is procurement teams didn't have budgets. And I think in the hierarchy of talent in an ecosystem, they were probably the lowest rung in the ladder, if you so will. So they knew they needed a tech platform. Obviously, staffing model has been there for a long time. And the only way they could fund the tech platform was through paying, a percent of the spend or the percent of the fee, right? By the way, it may make complete sense in that model.
Yes.
Because the platform is probably continuously handling job orders and time capture, and there's a lot of other components that go into it, right? But when it comes to a direct sourcing platform, I think again there was a precedent set because the procurement community was used to buying tech by paying a percent fee once people start working. So I think it was a path of least resistance to our predecessors who were selling the tech, and it worked. But I think we are at a point where companies should clearly see that they are going to be saving 15 to 20% of spend, right? And that's a strong enough business case, especially now, we can speak this vocally now because we have data points that show what good looks like, right?
Yes.
So leveraging that, it's going to be easier to get funding to pay a fixed SaaS fee and not pay me, let's say an hour for every hour the person that you hired to the platform is working. I would love that money, don't get me wrong, right?
Yeah.
But it just doesn't make sense. If our objective is to make sure our customers are successful in what they're doing, then we should do what is right for the customers. And I think
I agree.
by still doing a SaaS fee model, we all will come out ahead. It's not going to be detrimental, right? And then it works in our favor as well because we, as a tech provider, are no longer reliant on somebody from the services side doing their job properly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like it's a fascinating discussion though, Saleem, isn't it? Um, how I mean, this is a great starting point, and I'm sure you're having these conversations. But I know many of our listeners come from the procurement and HR. Many of our listeners come from the procurement and HR communities. I suppose it's a good place to start to have this discussion. In your experience, trying to upset what is the established way of buying a service in the, let's say, the human capital sector, and particularly the human capital sector that we find ourselves in, which is contingent workers or temporary workers or some form of independent workers. How difficult a conversation or a challenge is that to move from essentially what I would call a success-based or contingent-based model to a SaaS-based? Like, is that going to be a bit of a journey, Celine?
It has been, but in the last, I would say, in the last 6 months or so, people are more receptive to what I was just explaining to you, right? Hey, this is no different than how you procure RPO services. It's just that you're doing this for contingent. And especially since this is direct sourcing, a new channel for you, you can control. You're not changing the existing ecosystem. I'm not saying go argue with your staffing supplier on why you need to pay them, you know, 30% every month or for every hour that the contingent labor works for you. Yeah, there is payroll burden and all that stuff. That's why I said payrolling needs to be removed. But then why do I still need to pay, you know, 5, 10, 15% for every hour, right?
Yeah.
So not saying disrupt that, more power to you if you can, but this is a new avenue. There's a new opportunity to redefine, or define how the fee structure should work. And the conversations are becoming easier, especially because now we have data points. We have an example where we achieved so much success that within 3 months, the customer wanted to come to the table and renegotiate the pricing, right? Because if the CFO is looking at all the software they're paying a fee for, the question comes on what is it that this software does that's so special that I'll have to write a $2-3 million check, and the fees go up because the more you keep hiring, you're paying me a percent of the hourly rates, right? It becomes a really tough conversation. So I think it's a win-win by going with a SaaS fixed fee model. Initially, you have a higher outlay of cash.
Of course.
But then as you start sourcing more and more, your cost is not tracking parallel, right? It kind of levels off. So the conversation, now that we have data, Connor, and we are showing what it looks like, they're becoming easier. Customers are more open to that model, and we have quite a few, contracts that are in the final stages where this fixed fee model is playing out.
Good. And Saleem, it's great to hear that actually. And even in the sector that I'm coming from in my day job, the EOR, AOR, and we do some MSP services as well. It's not our core business. Our core business is the payroll side of the business. But but the same principles, in my view, should potentially apply. I mean, I think we have an opportunity as well to redetermine how our commercial model works. And I think a lot, and this is no blame game or anything like this, but if I think about the typical large enterprise, they'll have a vendor management system, and the vendor management system is based on a percentage model all the way through, not just from the VMS percentage, not just through the MSP percentage, but then the payroll percentage and the burdens. So it's almost structurally set up that way the whole way down or across the ecosystem, depending on your viewpoint. So I think we need to change from how the VMSs transact or engage with partners and suppliers across that ecosystem, because I think that's potentially a barrier for providers like ourselves, right? If you've got that fixed model and that's the only way to do things. And the other thing that I find interesting as well, Saleem, just on this topic is that I've seen a lot more. Like I'm probably considered old now. I'm 44, right? But I've seen.
You see them?
I can't grow a beard, Saleem. I wish I could, but I can't. Not one as elegant as yours. But I've seen what I would describe as probably younger people coming into the procurement sector and the contingent workforce sector that are interested in maybe disrupting how services are typically procured and constructed around the commercial models. I think we'll see some changes in that, and actually I welcome that, because just because it's always been that way doesn't mean that it's the best possible way going forward, in my view. So I'm with you. So one of the things I'm weirdly obsessed with, right? Well, there's loads of stuff, right? It's all PG stuff, right? It's all like related to our day jobs and stuff, right? So just for the avoidance of doubt, but is around talent channels, right? So in my view, platforms such as WorkLama are a route to talent, right? To finding talent, but so are talent marketplaces, which are different from yours, from your platform, Saleem. And then you've got staffing providers. Then you've got skills-based approach to hiring, which could be wrapped into platforms such as yours. But the way I see the market going, and I'm not sure if you agree with me or not, is that we will have multiple talent channels essentially all feeding off each other. And I've seen some really interesting models out there in the talent marketplace world. You've got Bench Talent Cloud that have aggregated, 20, 40 different talent marketplaces into one, and it gives you this amazing access to talent around the globe. But how do you see that? How do you see that going? Do you think we'll move into this talent channel world, or are we already there and I just haven't woken up and smelt the coffee, Saleem?
So, when we discussed earlier, right, disruption, competition versus coexistence, right, or complementary. So the way I look at this is, your staffing suppliers are people that go hunt for talent that you need, bring the right talent, pre-vet them, and submit to you, and then do some level of ongoing service, payrolling, compliance, and things like that, right? Now you look at freelancer marketplaces, it's a self-service staffing model, so to speak, right? And so you go there, you yourself look for talent, then you engage with talent directly. The platform enables you to engage them directly through whatever services, right? It enables on the talent side, the whole bill pay component of it. On your side, sourcing, trying to find the best talent. So you're doing it on your own, right? And then you leverage the platform for ratings, rankings, and all that good stuff. And then you have direct sourcing, where it's your own private, it's your own private a private army that you go into and enlist people when you need them, right? So then you have your perm talent. So all these channels will coexist, but the percent of reliance on each of these channels will vary based on the industry you're in and the skills you're looking to hire, right? So it's very hard to categorically dismiss one wouldn't exist without the other. What I'm hoping is the monetization models change, right? Like I said earlier, I don't know why, if I were the buying person, I don't know why I would want to pay 15% every month for every hour someone worked for me just because you found that person for me, right? So all these channels will coexist. What I see happening is, from a tech standpoint, you made a comment about point solutions. An ideal tech stack ecosystem would be a VMS, you'd have a core HR system, and then you have one system that deals with everything talent. I know it sounds like, I'm trying to promote WorkLama. It doesn't matter if there's another product that does it, you should look at it.
Yes,
right?
agree.
You need one component that becomes the gateway, or I call it your digital storefront for all talent. Any talent you want for your brand, they walk into that single entry point, right? So it could be FMS that's bolted on, could be a staffing supplier that's using the same component. It's also a tool that's used by your direct sourcing provider.
Yes.
So I see all these channels existing together. It depends on how much your industry and the skill types you're using will drive the mix of these channels within your organization's ecosystem.
Yeah, I love how you've described that gateway point, or a front door where all the talent can go into and come from. And I think that is a really smart way of describing what is required, Saleem. And I think the organizations, large enterprise, medium size, as they start to move towards that model, the talent is going to have an amazing experience, right? Subject, of course, to picking the right provider, whether it's WorkLama or there's some others out there, of course. But I think your point is well made. But it leads me to a question, Saleem, that I wanted to speak with you about and get your take. We talk about talent first a lot, right? And I think you and I are. You've definitely mentioned it maybe once or twice already in the course of our conversation. And it strikes me that it's a smart move to put talent first in a talent scarce market, right? And when I'm really talking about talent scarcity, I'm talking about Western labor markets that are essentially full and also are suffering from a demographic deficit or decline. We're simply not producing enough people in the workforce, right? And the birth rates are like going like this. And the only thing that's saving certain economies is immigration or migration. I always get it wrong, but bringing people in essentially, and of course that's becoming much more harder in various countries that we don't need to go into. It's not a politics show, but the point remains, Saleem, that the talent is scarce, right, for some of those reasons, and it makes sense then, of course, to look after talent that you're engaging with through platforms such as yours or on behalf of the end client. But what in your view is putting talent first, or a talent first approach, really about, Saleem? Would you care to share your thoughts?
Yeah, in a talent shortage ecosystem, it does make. I mean, it's a no-brainer, right? You do need to treat them the way you need to treat them. So the way I look at it is, right, if you look at organization spend, the largest cost item is human capital cost, right? Why is that? Because they are the most strategic component that drives success of the organization, right? Otherwise, why would you be spending so much money? Not, right? So your talent is your key competitive advantage towards winning. Obviously, there are tools and things like that, right? And I had to bring in the concepts of war and things like that. If you think about some of the most successful dynasties of the past, they all had great people who drove great innovation. At the same time, they had people that did a lot of grunt work, right? That's what made them successful. So if human capital is one of the most important component of the organization, they are a strategic asset. Right? If they are a strategic asset, then it's time for you to look at them as such, which means you need to give them the same amount of importance that you give to your customers. And there's proven research where, I was recently talking about talent experience during hiring process. And supposedly the research, has, if talent that's engaging with your brand during a hiring process has a bad experience, you lose them as a customer, right? So yeah, talent and talent experience, if you forget everything else I said so far, has an impact on your organization when you're dealing with customers, right? So, talent is a key component, and for you to treat them as a strategic asset and putting them at the center of everything you do in your company becomes critical. And when you start taking that perspective, it also solves for the issues you're talking about, shortages, right? Then you start looking at how do you upskill talent, right? Then how do you create internal mobility paths? So there's so much that goes into it. And all of it has to do with understanding that talent is your competitive advantage. And what do you do to retain them? What do you do to attract them? What do you do to engage them? It becomes core of everything you do.
I love that phrase, Saleem. Talent becomes your competitive advantage. That's a really lovely phrase, which I'm probably going to borrow, Saleem, if that's okay. So, Saleem, as I've said, we've known each other a reasonably long time. At this point, you've been in business, and your platform and technology has been through various evolutions or iterations. You've really moved from, I suppose, the startup to the scale up, and now your organization's grown up. And I think you've been in the privileged position to work and still working with some of the world's most impressive and largest organizations. But from my experience, tech companies always need money because they always need to iterate, they always need to evolve, they always need to move fast. Exactly, you're hungry for success, but also the tech is hungry for capital. Technology needs fed money, right? If I could distill it down to its very simple terms, and I'm a simple guy, Saleem. But Saleem, what's it like out there trying to raise money or look at strategic investment? I'm not saying you're in that space, but what are you hearing from your fellow technology and entrepreneurs? What's it like out there? Is it all about unit economics now, or is total available market where it's at still product market fit? What's it like out there? Is it tough from what you understand?
Yeah, it is tough, right? I mean, we're starting to dabble in that space right now, meaning we're looking into additional capital. So I don't think it's shortage of money. There is plenty of money. It's just that people are hoarding money, and it just so happens that you put a AI in your prefix or suffix, then you'll get a little more attention,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, understood.
Yeah. So there is money. It's just that I think what has happened in the past 12 months or so, right? People have become very cautious, and obviously with U.S. elections and things like that, right? That's put some of the damper, and most of the money that's flowed has been flowing into the AI space and healthcare and fintech, probably other areas. But in the human capital space, it's been a little slow, especially if you're doing something in the contingent space. But we do see things changing. Maybe after first quarter of next year. But that's been my thought until a few minutes ago. And I saw, not a few minutes ago, before we started our podcast, I saw Jamie Dimon say Third World War has already started, so we're going to rethink how we handle our money.
Wow.
So
Really?
I was like, okay, yeah, I can forward you the article. That would have freaked me out a little bit. I was like, oh, next year, first half of next year is going to be great.
Yeah. I'm going to bunker down. I'm glad I live in the middle of nowhere, Saleem. Hopefully that will save me.
Well, you may have some uninvited guests who may want to be heading there. You're visiting when you're there.
So welcome it. That's crazy. So that will probably have that will certainly have a negative effect on the funding environment. I think it's fair to say probably that the interest rate environment and the tightening of monetary policy from the central banks is certainly having an impact too. The era of free money from the central banks is well and truly over, and it'll be interesting to see with the new government in the UK and also in the USA from January whether the central banks might rethink some of their more stringent policies around and releasing money back into the economy. So interesting to hear that, though, Saleem. Your perspective. So, Saleem, I know artificial intelligence has a part to play in your platform. I know you haven't rebranded as WorkLlama.ai, but you might want to take advantage of that funding and environment. But listen, I've been talking at length on this podcast and many other events and other podcasts that I don't host, that I'm skeptical about AI. Now, having said that, I am a user of artificial intelligence. I'm an avid user of ChatGPT and more recently Microsoft Copilot. I think it's bloody brilliant. But my view is, Saleem, that there should be more limits around development on AI, because in my view it needs to stop somewhere, right? But that's just my view, right? But what's your take on artificial intelligence from a good, bad, and ugly perspective, Saleem? And there doesn't have to be a bad or an ugly, of course.
Yeah. So, first and foremost, right, there is us as tech providers, right? We like to ride the wave, so to speak. But, a lot of automation is being couched as AI. What happens is, just like the way we talked about direct sourcing, right, there's a lot of confusion that gets created in the market. And on the buyer side, what happens is you end up with two pools, I would say. To keep it simple, I'll call them two pools. There may be additional, right? One pool of people is they're scared that if they don't catch up, they'll be left behind, FOMO kind of thing, right? Which means they're just grabbing onto anything any supplier wants to talk about and show, hey, it's going to do something in this corner of your business, right? And then you have the others who are on the extreme side. They just are very skeptical about everything, which again is not ideal, right? There needs to be a good balance, because there's a lot of good true AI tech out there, right? So I'll talk specifically about our talent industry, right? I think just buying something out of FOMO is not ideal. I think the main thing to do is draw out your workflows. What do you do as a business? And then sit with experts, even if it's someone that may be a potential suppliers, and ask them, what are the areas where you can put AI to make me do things better? And ask them to clearly explain how, right? How and what it does. And I think that's how you want to go about this. So I think AI is definitely good. I also believe in having certain guardrails around it, right? And only buy things that are relevant and that are going to drive efficiency for what you're doing. Just don't buy something for the sake of buying, right? And the approach we have taken is what I just described to you. We had AI for a long time, since when you and I were talking. We just never really wanted to put it up in center because there was no need for it. So now we have taken the whole approach of drawing out the workflows and clearly identifying where you can drive efficiency. And did you remember the whole cost curve and the whole 5 pieces, what you start bringing in? Like bringing most of those in-house is the promised land. Then those are the areas where we are putting significant automation plus AI, so you can bring those pieces in and do it with 2 people as opposed to 10 people, right? And do it much better, higher quality, faster, right? So that's kind of my take on AI. Maybe we'll do an AI podcast and we can talk more.
Yeah, I would love that. I find that fascinating. Here's what I find fascinating about technology and AI in general. Actually, I'll look at something specific. So if you look at the cost of technology over a 30-year period, it's essentially plummeted like a stone, right? Even simple things, Saleem, like the cost of a television now versus 30 years ago or 25 years ago, it's like 97% cheaper, right? The cost to deploy an AI chatbot versus 10 years ago, 5 years ago has actually dropped exponentially. So we're in this deflationary cycle with regards to the cost of technology, right? But if you look at the cost of labor, i.e. people, right? That's not deflationary. And it's not just inflationary because of the economic cycle that we've found ourselves in. If you look back to the period from 2017 in Europe, including Ireland, the chart will look like this, Saleem, in terms of people cost, right? It's growing all the time, right? But yet the cost of technology is plummeting like a stone. And I think that's what interests me the most, because as technology becomes cheaper, faster, better, the need for humans to do certain jobs will diminish, because economically the decisions are already being made, right? You cannot argue with that sort of model. And that's what I find most fascinating about that. Anyway, that's rather esoteric, so we'll definitely do a podcast on that.
Yeah, no, so I think the components you talked about, right? There are certain aspects of technology that as they start hitting a certain level of maturity, they become commodity and the prices start dropping,
Yes.
right? But there'll always be pieces that will drive costs up as well until they become scalable, right? For example, right now, GPUs and first of all, there's a scarcity, right, of those components. So there'll be a period of time where the costs are going to be high up, and then as they start scaling, it will go down. And by the time they're going down, something new comes up.
Yes.
With TVs, I'm trying to do some remodeling in my house, and I was telling a friend that I'm going to have a screen that rolls down, and I'm going to put a projector. And he was saying, "Hey, they now make TVs. You just pull the screen down, and that is the TV. You don't need a projector." And I was like, "Oh wow, that sounds cool." And I was looking at it. It's like $120,000, $130,000 screen. Look at that. That's yeah. No thanks. Exactly. Well, the world changes.
It does. But in 5 years, I bet you it's less than 20,000. In fact, I would bet that in 5 years, it will be less than 10.
Yeah. Well, that I'm hoping it gets to 2 or something. I hope.
Probably. Exactly. Well, sorry, man, I'm loving this, but I'd love to continue our conversation, but I know it's coming up. We're recording this in the week prior to the US Thanksgiving holiday. So, but just before we finish our conversation, which I've absolutely loved, Saleem, I always enjoy our conversations immensely. And certainly this is one of them as well. But Saleem, I'd love to finish with this question, which is the following. What is your prediction or predictions for the future of work?
Yeah, I think so one of the things that surprised me is now it's all about skill-based hiring and this and that. But sometimes I'm like, how were you hiring before? If you need right? So I do, people have tried to explain to me from the standpoint of your educational history, this, that, and all those mattered. And I was okay, that's not how we were hiring. But anyway, so I think the future of work is going to become what I was talking to you about, where pretty soon organizations will start accepting the fact that talent is a competitive advantage. And then they'll start looking at talent from a holistic standpoint. And some of these things, a lot of other industry leaders have talked about. I'm kind of, agreeing with the points of view. I'm just trying to bring them all together, right? So organizations will start looking at talent as a competitive advantage. They'll start looking at talent as a holistic entity. Doesn't matter how you source them, right? Or what your form of engagement is. And they'll try to make that work environment a cohesive environment, which actually justifies more for having your own direct source contingent talent, right? Then you can create that holistic view of talent. And then, it becomes a very outcome based type of a function, as opposed to, I need a person to do a job, as opposed to, I need this work done. Who are the type of people I need? Right. And then where it goes from there is, once you know what is it that you need to complete a piece of work, and then the talent shortage question that you brought up comes into play, right? So if I can't get to point B with what I have, what else can I do? Is upskilling an option, right? Yeah, maybe you bring in temporary work from outside, pair them up with the right type of skills in the channel that you have, and try to upskill them, right? So I think all of these things will start happening. But I think that the first thing is for organizations to think about talent as a competitive advantage, start looking at what is the mix of talent, what is the best avenue to source them, how do you get to point B from point A where you are today.
I love it. I love it, Saleem. Saleem, thanks so much for taking the time to spend with me and our audience. I've really enjoyed it, as I said, and I know our audience will enjoy it too. So, Saleem, just ahead of the Thanksgiving season, just wanted to wish you a very happy holidays and every success for the rest of the year and of course beyond. So, Saleem, should our audience wish to find out more about WorkLama or indeed contact you directly, where's the best place to look you guys up?
Well, first of all, thank you. Thanks for the wishes. Thanks for having me on this panel. I always enjoy our conversations. There's always a surprise question or a collection of surprise questions, which are anyway, they're all relevant. So, it's great. I love chatting with you. Yeah, to reach us, obviously, I'm on LinkedIn. That'd be a good place. Not many people with my name and WorkLama associated. And then WorkLlama.com, is a great place to contact us.
Great. Well, Saleem, thanks so much for your time. Great to see you and looking forward to seeing you in person soon, I hope. Take care, mate.
Yep. Thank you. You have a great one, Connor.
You too, sir. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Open Talent Report with Connor Heaney. If you found this podcast informative and engaging, make sure you subscribe, tell your friends, and follow us on all your favorite streaming platforms.